Good day, everyone. My name is Levi M. Panganiban. This is HM 1103. I will tackle about how to eliminate hazards and risks. Eliminating hazards and risks. The word hazard and risk are usually used interchangeably, but there are a few important differences between us. Knowing these differences can help us put our energy into significantly lowering risk rather than trying to eliminate every hazard. A hazard is a source of danger. Think of it. Anything that poses a threat to our health, life, property, or the environment. A risk is the chance that someone or something will be harmed by that hazard. What are the main ways to control the hazard? First, elimination, including substitution. Second, engineering controls. Third, administrative controls. Fourth, personal protective equipment. These methods are also known as the hierarchy of control. Hierarchy of control are used to remove or reduce risk in workplace area. It starts with the most effective control method and finishes with the least effective method. Elimination, including substitution, remove the hazard from the workplace or substitute hazardous materials or machines with less hazardous ones. Engineering controls includes designs or modifications to plants, equipment, ventilation system, and processes that reduce of source of exposure. Engineering control has basic steps. The first is the process control. Involves changing the way activity or process is done to reduce the risk. Monitoring should be done before and as well as the change is implemented to make sure the changes did, in fact, control the hazard. Enclosure and isolation. This method aims to keep the chemical in and worker out or vice versa. An enclosure keeps a selected hazard physically away from the worker. Isolation places the hazardous process geographically away from the majority of the worker. Common isolation techniques are to create a contaminant-free or noise-free, both either around the equipment or around the employee workstations. Third, ventilation. That strategically adds and removes air in the work environment. It can also remove or dilute an air contaminant if designed properly. Administrative controls includes training, housekeeping and equipment maintenance, and personal hygiene practices. Work practices. In most workplaces, even if they are well designed and well maintained, engineering control present, safe work practices are very important. Education and training. How to conduct their work safely helps to minimize the risk of exposure and is a critical element of a complete workplace health and safety program. Good housekeeping. To prevent the accumulation of hazardous or toxic materials or hazardous conditions. Emergency preparedness. Being prepared for emergencies means making sure that the necessary equipment and supplies are readily available. Personal hygiene practices and facilities. Personal hygiene practices are another effective way to reduce the amount of hazardous material absorbed, ingested, or inhaled by the worker. They are particularly effective in the contaminants can accumulate on the skin, clothing, or hair. Personal protective equipment. Equipment worn by individuals to reduce exposure, such as contact with chemicals or exposure to noise. Personal protective equipment includes respirator, protective clothing such as gloves, face shields, eye protection, and footwear to serve to provide a barrier between the wearer and the chemical or material. Never be the only method used to reduce exposure except under very specific circumstances because PPE may fail. No matter which type of PPE is used, it is essential to have a complete PPE program in place. Where are controls used? At the source where the hazard comes from, along the path where the hazard travels, at the worker. What is meant by elimination? Process of removing the hazard from the workplace is the most effective way to control the risk because the hazard is no longer present. It is preferred way to control the hazard that should use whenever possible. There are three steps to hazard control. The first one is identify the hazard. This job and can and should be done by anyone at workplace. If you think you something that is potentially dangerous, then report it to your superior or the OHS representative. Second, assess the risk. The next job is to see how much of the risk the hazard poses. This is usually done by an occupational health and safety representative. Third, make the change. The best thing that can be done with a hazard is to eliminate it. If it is not possible or reasonable, the next thing is to control the hazard. This can be done with barriers, signage, and staff training in procedures and safe practices. Always check with your superior or supervisor if you are unsure about the job you have been asked to do. Hazard prevention and control helps avoid injuries, illness, and incidents, minimize or eliminate safe and health risks, and employers provide workers with safe and healthful working conditions. Employers should involve workers who often have the best understanding of the conditions that create hazards and insights into how they can be controlled. Second, identify and evaluate options for controlling hazard using a hierarchy control. Third, use a hazard control plan to guide the selection and implementation of controls and implement controls according to the plan. Develop plans with the measures to protect workers during emergency and non-routine activities. Last, evaluate the effectiveness of existing controls to determine whether they continue to provide protection or whether different controls may be effective. Review new technologies, go for potential to be more protective, more reliable, or more costly. There are four steps to manage hazards and risks. S. Spot the hazard. A. Assess the risk. F. Fix the problem. E. Evaluate results. Don't forget the word safe. Spot the hazard includes manual tasks, untidy workplaces, bullying and violence, working at heights, faulty and unguarded machinery, chemicals, noise. poor work design, inadequate management system. Assess the risk. You should also consider how many people are exposed to the hazard and remember that anyone is different. A hazard may pose more risk to some people than others because of differences in physical strength, experience, and training. Fix the problem. You should always aim to remove a hazard completely from your workplace. Where this isn't practical, you should work through the other alternatives systematically. Evaluate results. Find out whether the changes have been effectively. Get feedback from those affected by the changes and includes them in any modifications to their workplace or work routines. And that's all for today. Thank you for listening.